The first snow of the season arrived earlier than anyone expected. It drifted across the valley in thin white ribbons, covering the fields and turning the distant mountains pale beneath a gray sky. June Hale stood alone beside a broken fence, her gloved hands numb from the cold. The ranch stretched around her, quiet and empty, too quiet. 3 years ago there had always been someone nearby. Her father checking livestock, ranch hands laughing near the barn, dreams of a future she thought was certain. Now there was only wind and work, always work. June tightened the final wire and stepped back. The repair would hold for now, at least she hoped it would. Winter was coming fast and the ranch was already struggling. She glanced toward the old farmhouse. Smoke rose from the chimney. It should have felt like home. Instead, it often felt like a place she was trying not to lose, a place held together by stubbornness. The same stubbornness that kept her going every morning, the same stubbornness that stopped her from asking anyone for help, especially after what had happened. A sharp gust swept across the field. June pulled her coat tighter and headed toward the barn. As she walked, memories followed her like shadows, her father smiling beside the cattle pens, his rough voice telling her she was stronger than she realized. Then came the winter he never survived, a fever, a storm, a lonely grave beneath a pine tree. Only months before that loss, another wound had opened. The man she had planned to marry had packed his belongings and left town without warning. No goodbye worth remembering. No promise worth believing, just excuses. After that, June learned something simple. People left. The ranch remained, so she poured every piece of herself into keeping it alive. Even when it felt impossible. Inside the barn, she checked feed supplies, not enough. Again, she made a note in her ledger, another expense, another problem. The list seemed endless. A loud knock interrupted her thoughts. She turned. Martha Reed stood in the doorway carrying a basket. "Figured you'd forget to eat," Martha said. June managed a smile. "I haven't forgotten. You say that every time." Martha stepped inside and handed over the basket. Fresh bread, a jar of preserves, a few apples, simple kindness, the kind June rarely accepted. "Thank you," Martha studied her carefully. "You're working too hard." "I'm working enough." "That's not the same thing," June laughed softly. Martha was one of the few people who could still make her do that. For a moment they spoke about town news, the upcoming winter, prices, supplies. Then Martha's expression changed. "You hear about the storm coming?" June frowned. "No, folks say it could be bad." The words settled heavily between them. A bad storm could destroy months of work. It could ruin fences, scatter cattle, damage buildings already showing their age. June looked toward the darkening sky. She felt uneasy, very uneasy. That evening the wind arrived. By midnight it was howling. Snow slammed against the windows. The house groaned beneath powerful gusts. June barely slept. Every sound made her wonder what would still be standing by morning. Near dawn, a violent crash shook the property. She bolted upright, her heart pounded. The sound had come from outside. She grabbed a lantern and rushed into the storm. The wind nearly knocked her sideways. Snow swirled through the darkness. Visibility was almost gone. When she finally reached the barn, her stomach dropped. Part of the roof had collapsed. Several support beams had splintered. One wall leaned dangerously inward. "Not now," she whispered. "Please, not now." The damage was severe, far beyond what she could repair alone. For the first time in years, panic crept into her chest. If the barn failed completely, she could lose livestock. Without livestock, the ranch might not survive the winter. The realization hit hard. She stood in the snow, staring at the wreckage, alone, just as she always was. Hours later, after the storm weakened, June rode into town. The streets were crowded with people discussing damage. Everyone had suffered losses. Everyone was busy. When she explained what happened, sympathetic faces greeted her, but no solutions. No one had enough time or workers to spare. At the general store, she overheard two men talking. "You should ask Grant." June looked up. The men exchanged glances. One shook his head immediately. "Forget I said anything." "Grant?" June asked. The older man lowered his voice. "Cole Grant." The name seemed to change the air around them. Martha, standing nearby, looked uncomfortable. June noticed. "Who's Cole Grant?" Neither man answered right away. Finally, the older one spoke. "The mountain rancher, the dangerous one," the other added. Martha frowned. "People talk too much?" But the warning had already been planted. Dangerous, the mountain rancher. June listened as bits of rumor followed. A deadly incident years ago, a violent temper. A man who preferred isolation, a man most folks avoided. The more she heard, the more curious she became. By afternoon she rode home. The sky had cleared, the valley glowed beneath fresh snow. Everything looked peaceful, but her thoughts remained unsettled. When she reached the ranch, her horse suddenly slowed. Someone was there, near the damaged barn. A tall figure stood beside the collapsed structure. Broad shoulders, dark coat, still as stone, watching the damage, watching her. June's pulse quickened. The stranger turned slightly. Snow crunched beneath his boots. For a long moment neither of them moved. Then she realized exactly who she was looking at. Cole Grant, the man everyone feared. And somehow he was standing on her ranch. June remained in the saddle, her fingers tightening around the reins. The tall man beside the barn did not move toward her. He did not wave. He did not speak. He simply stood there studying the damage. For someone the town described as dangerous, he looked surprisingly calm. The winter wind stirred his dark coat. A few snowflakes drifted between them. Finally, June guided her horse closer. "You've got business here?" she asked. The man looked up. His face was weathered from years outdoors, but there was nothing threatening in his expression, only quiet attention. "I heard about the storm." His voice was deep but gentle. June blinked. That wasn't what she expected. "Who told you?" "Martha." Of course, Martha worried about everyone. Cole glanced at the damaged roof. "You can't fix that alone." The statement irritated her because it was true. "I'll manage." His eyes moved across the broken beams. "No," just one word, not rude, not cruel, simply honest. June crossed her arms. "And what exactly are you suggesting?" "I can help." She stared. "You don't even know me." Cole looked back at the barn. "You need help?" That seemed to be the only explanation he considered necessary. June wasn't sure what to say. The town painted this man as someone to avoid. Yet here he was offering assistance without being asked. She remembered the whispers, the warnings, the stories. Still, the collapsing barn stood behind him, and she desperately needed help. "What do you want in return?" she asked. "Nothing." The answer came instantly. June narrowed her eyes. Nobody worked for nothing, nobody, but Cole merely waited, no pressure, no expectation. Just patience. Finally, she nodded once. "Fine." That afternoon, they started repairs. Cole worked with quiet efficiency. He measured damaged sections, removed broken beams, stabilized weak supports. Every movement suggested years of experience. What would have taken June weeks alone began moving forward in hours, yet something else surprised her. He never acted like he was rescuing her. Never acted superior. Whenever he spoke, it was practical, respectful, as if he considered them equals. By sunset, they had repaired more than June thought possible. The sky glowed orange behind the mountains. Cole packed his tools. June hesitated. "Thank you." He gave a small nod, then he started toward his horse. "That's it?" she asked. He paused. "What, you're just leaving?" The corner of his mouth almost lifted. "Work starts again tomorrow." Then he rode away. June watched until he disappeared among the snowy hills. The next morning she rode into town for supplies. The moment people noticed her purchases, questions began. At the feed store, Ben Turner leaned against a post. "I heard Grant's helping you." News traveled fast, too fast. June kept loading supplies. "He repaired part of the barn." Ben frowned. "You should be careful." "Why?" Ben exchanged looks with another customer. "You know why?" "No, I know rumors." The blacksmith lowered his voice. "There was a man killed up in the mountains years back." June paused. Ben continued. "Folks say Grant started the fight." Another customer nodded. "Always had a temper." June remembered Cole quietly lifting beams all afternoon. The image didn't fit. Still, curiosity stirred. What happened exactly? Neither man seemed certain. Their stories differed, details changed, facts blurred, yet they all ended the same way: avoid Cole Grant. When June left town, she felt more confused than before. The rumors were loud. But the evidence sitting in her memory felt different. She returned to the ranch expecting another long day of work. Cole was already there, repairing the roof, alone, without being asked. Without waiting for her, for several hours they worked side by side, mostly in silence. Oddly, the silence felt comfortable. Near noon, June climbed down from a ladder. "You always this quiet?" Cole glanced over. "Usually, you don't like people?" "I like some." The answer surprised a laugh out of her. A faint smile appeared on his face, only for a second. But she saw it, and suddenly the feared mountain rancher seemed much more human. As the days passed, the barn slowly returned to life. Trust didn't arrive all at once. It arrived in small moments. A repaired gate before she noticed it was broken. Firewood stacked beside her porch after a freezing night. A loose wagon wheel fixed without explanation. Cole never mentioned any of it. Never sought praise, he simply handled problems when he saw them. One afternoon, as they finished reinforcing the final roof beam, June noticed fresh exhaustion in his face. "You should rest." "I'm fine. You said that like I do." A rare smile appeared again. This one lasted slightly longer, then something caught June's attention, a burlap sack tied behind his saddle. Another beside it, supplies, food, medicine, blankets, far more than one man needed. Cole noticed her looking. For the first time since they'd met, he seemed uncomfortable. Without explanation, he mounted his horse. "I'll see you tomorrow." Before she could ask questions, he rode away. June watched him disappear toward the mountains, not toward his ranch. Toward a heavily wooded ridge beyond it, the supplies bounced lightly against the saddle. Something felt strange. That evening, curiosity got the better of her. She climbed a hill overlooking part of the valley. The winter sun was sinking low, long shadows stretched across the snow. Far in the distance she spotted a lone rider, Cole. He followed a narrow trail toward a small cabin hidden among the pines, a cabin no one ever mentioned. No smoke rose from its chimney, no livestock surrounded it. It appeared abandoned. Yet Cole dismounted there. He carried the supplies to the door, then disappeared inside. June stood frozen in the cold. The town said he wanted nothing to do with people. The town said he lived only for himself. So why was he secretly bringing food, medicine, and blankets to an isolated cabin deep in the mountains, and who was waiting inside? The image stayed with June all night. Cole carrying supplies into a lonely mountain cabin, a cabin hidden far from town, a cabin no one ever talked about. By morning, her curiosity had become impossible to ignore. She tried focusing on work, feeding livestock, checking fences, balancing accounts, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the mountains. Who was he helping, and why keep it secret? Later that afternoon, Cole arrived as usual. Snow dusted his shoulders, a toolbox hung from one hand. June watched him carefully. "You heading anywhere after work?" He glanced up. "Maybe, mountain cabin." For the first time since meeting him, real surprise crossed his face. "You followed me?" "Not exactly." The answer wasn't entirely true. Cole sighed softly, neither angry nor defensive, just resigned. "I suppose sooner or later someone would notice." June waited. He returned to repairing a gate, conversation over, or so he seemed to think. "You aren't going to explain?" Cole drove a nail into place, then another. Finally he looked at her. "Someone lives there? Who?" "A friend." The answer felt incomplete, yet his expression made it clear he would say no more. Normally that would have irritated June. Instead, it made her even more curious. Over the next week, winter tightened its grip on the valley. Snow covered the hills. The river slowed beneath sheets of ice. And somehow, despite the cold, June found herself looking forward to Cole's visits. Not because of the work, at least not entirely. His presence made the ranch feel less empty, less lonely. One afternoon they repaired fencing near the north pasture. A strong wind swept across the field. June pulled her scarf higher. "My father hated winter," she said unexpectedly. Cole looked over. It was the first time she'd mentioned family. "He lived here his whole life." She smiled sadly. "He knew every inch of this valley." Cole waited, never rushing her, never filling silence. The patience made talking easier. "He died during a bad winter." The words came quietly. 3 years ago, Cole lowered his hammer. I'm sorry, simple words. Yet they carried more comfort than most speeches. June stared across the snowy pasture. After he died, I kept thinking I'd hear him outside. Cole said nothing. She appreciated that. Sometimes silence respected grief better than advice. A few moments later, he spoke. My father died young too. June turned. It was the first personal thing he had shared. You were close, Cole nodded. He taught me everything. The sadness in his eyes appeared only briefly, then it disappeared again, but June noticed. For the first time, she realized something important. Cole carried wounds too, maybe different from hers, but wounds all the same. The little girl opened her package. Inside sat a handmade wooden horse. Her eyes lit up. You made it, Cole nodded. The child hugged him without hesitation. June watched quietly. Nothing about this matched the rumors, nothing. On the ride back toward town, she finally asked, Who is she? Cole looked ahead. Lucy Bell, and the woman, her grandmother. June waited. Eventually he continued. Lucy's father died years ago. Something in his voice changed. The words seemed heavier, more personal. Since then I've helped where I can. June frowned. For years, yes, without telling anyone. Cole shrugged. They didn't need everyone knowing. The answer lingered between them. Most people would have wanted recognition, praise, credit. Cole wanted none of it. The realization chipped away at another piece of the story she'd believed. That evening June couldn't stop thinking about Lucy, about the wooden horse. About the smile she had seen, and about the man the town claimed was dangerous. Several days later, another unexpected discovery arrived. June was sorting old records inside the sheriff's office. She needed paperwork related to a property line. While searching through dusty files, a newspaper clipping slipped from a folder. The headline immediately caught her eye. Mountain tragedy claims one life. The article described an accident from years earlier. The same incident people always connected to Cole. June read every word, then read it again. Something felt wrong, very wrong. The article never said Cole started a fight. It never mentioned violence. In fact, several lines hinted that he had helped rescue trapped men during the disaster. June's heart began to race. She searched for more records, more reports, more details. The deeper she looked, the less the town's story made sense. By sunset, she left the sheriff's office carrying a troubling question. If the rumors were false, if Cole hadn't caused the tragedy, then why had an entire valley spent years believing he had? And what else had everyone gotten wrong? The question followed June for days. Everywhere she went, she heard the same old rumors about Cole, at the feed store, at church, along the main street. People repeated the story with complete confidence, yet when June asked for facts, nobody seemed to have any, only assumptions, only gossip, only years of retelling the same tale. The more she learned, the more unsettled she became. One evening she rode to the mountains. The sky burned gold behind the peaks. Cole was splitting firewood outside his cabin. He looked up as she approached. You came a long way. I have questions. His expression tightened slightly. About what? The accident. The axe stopped moving. For several seconds neither spoke. Finally Cole set the tool aside. You should leave that alone. Why? His gaze drifted toward the valley below, because some wounds never truly healed. June could see it in his face. The past still hurt. The town says you started a fight. I know what they say. They also say someone died because of you. Cole remained silent. That silence told her more than words, not guilt, pain, a different thing entirely. June stepped closer. I found old reports. His eyes met hers. For the first time, real emotion showed there. Not anger, weariness, the exhaustion of carrying something too heavy for too long. There was no fight, was there? A cold wind moved through the pines. Finally, Cole answered. No. June's heart quickened. What happened? He stared toward the mountains, then slowly began. Years earlier, several men had been working near a mining trail above the valley. A sudden rockslide struck without warning. Boulders crashed down the mountainside. Men were trapped, others injured. Chaos followed. Cole had been nearby. He rushed into the danger to help. Again and again, pulling men free, searching unstable ground, ignoring the risk to himself. Most survived. One man did not, Lucy's father. June listened quietly. The story felt nothing like the rumors. He wasn't trapped when I reached him, Cole said. His voice was low. He pushed another man out of the way, Cole swallowed. He saved someone's life. The sadness in his eyes deepened. But people needed someone to blame. June understood. Tragedy often created questions without answers. People hated uncertainty. Sometimes blame felt easier. The rumors started after that, Cole nodded. I didn't bother correcting them. June stared. Why not? His answer came after a long pause. Because it wouldn't bring him back. The simplicity broke her heart. Years of judgment, years of isolation, and he had simply endured it, not because he deserved it. Because he believed arguing would change nothing. June looked away, fighting unexpected emotion. You helped Lucy all this time, Cole shrugged lightly. Her father would have done the same for someone else. That was all. No heroic speech, no attempt to defend himself, just quiet kindness. The same kindness she had witnessed from the beginning. Something shifted inside her then, not curiosity, not friendship, something deeper, something far more dangerous. Because for the first time in years, June realized she was beginning to care, a lot. The following weeks became the happiest she could remember. Winter settled fully over the valley, snow blanketed the ranch, the repairs were finished, the barn stood strong again. And somehow Cole became part of her daily life. They shared coffee before work, laughed more often, talked about small things, memories, dreams, stories from childhood. Nothing happened quickly. Nothing felt forced. Trust simply grew, like sunlight returning after a long storm. One evening they sat beside a campfire outside the ranch house. The stars filled the sky. Neither seemed eager to leave. You ever think about moving somewhere else? Cole asked. June poked at the fire. Sometimes. It wasn't entirely true. Recently she had thought about leaving quite a bit. A businessman from another county had made an offer on the ranch. A generous offer, enough money to start over, enough money to escape old memories. Until now, she had seriously considered it. Cole nodded slowly. I imagine you'd do well anywhere. The comment sounded simple, yet sadness lingered beneath it as though he expected her to go. The realization unsettled her. A few days later, the businessman returned, this time demanding an answer. The offer would expire soon. June stood alone in the farmhouse afterward, staring at documents spread across the table. Leave or stay, a fresh start or the life she'd spent years protecting. Her mind felt torn. That evening she rode into town. There she overheard something unexpected, someone mentioning Cole, someone claiming he planned to leave the valley after winter. The rumor hit hard, much harder than it should have. By the time she found Cole the next day, emotion had already clouded her judgment. You never mentioned leaving, he looked confused. What? The valley? Realization crossed his face. Then frustration. I never said that. But people are talking. People talk about everything. June knew that, yet old fears had awakened, the same fears left behind by loss and abandonment. The same fears that whispered everyone eventually left. Everyone, even him. The argument that followed wasn't loud, that somehow made it worse. Neither said exactly what they felt. Neither admitted what was truly frightening them. When it ended, silence remained, heavy and painful. Cole stepped back. If you decide to sell the ranch, I hope you find what you're looking for. June's chest tightened. He thought she was leaving, and before she could explain, he mounted his horse. The distance between them felt sudden, sharp, terrible. She watched him ride away through falling snow. For the first time since meeting him, she didn't know if he would come back. And standing there alone, June realized something she could no longer deny. She wasn't afraid of losing the ranch. She was afraid of losing Cole. The ranch felt different after Cole left, quieter. Colder, as if something important had gone missing. For 2 days, June threw herself into work. She repaired fences, checked livestock, cleaned stalls, anything to keep her mind occupied. Nothing helped. Every task reminded her of him, the repaired barn, the stacked firewood, the gate he had fixed. Small acts of kindness scattered across the property like footprints. By the third morning, she could no longer pretend. The problem wasn't the ranch, the problem was fear. Fear had guided her for years, fear of loss, fear of disappointment. Fear of trusting someone enough to matter. And now that fear was about to cost her the one person who had never given her a reason to doubt him. That afternoon, June rode into town. The businessman waited for her answer. People gathered nearby, curious about her decision. June took a steady breath, then shook her head. "I'm not selling." The man looked surprised. "You sure?" "Very." For the first time in years, the choice felt easy. The ranch wasn't a burden, it was home, and home was where she wanted to build a future. As she turned away, Sheriff Wade approached. "June, I've got somewhere to be. You might want to hear this first." The sheriff held several old documents. Official records from the mountain accident, witness statements, reports that had been forgotten for years. Wade looked frustrated. "These should have been made public a long time ago." Within hours, word spread through town. People gathered at the general store, the church, the sheriff's office, reading the reports for themselves. The truth became impossible to ignore. Cole Grant had not caused the tragedy. He had helped save lives. Several witnesses described him risking his own safety to pull trapped men from danger. One report even credited him with preventing further deaths. The valley had spent years judging the wrong man. That evening, guilt hung heavily over town. Ben Turner stood outside the blacksmith shop shaking his head. "I should have known better." Others said similar things. Rumors had been easy, truth required effort. For the first time, people began seeing Cole clearly, but June wasn't thinking about the town. She was already riding toward the mountains. Snow fell lightly around her. The sun was setting behind the peaks. The trail climbed higher and higher until she finally saw the familiar cabin. Cole stood outside splitting wood, just as he had the first time she came there. He looked up, surprise crossed his face, then caution. June dismounted quickly. "I should have come sooner." Neither moved. The cold air seemed to hold its breath. "You don't owe me anything," Cole said. "Yes, I do." His expression softened slightly. June stepped closer. "I spent years believing I didn't need anyone." The words were difficult, honest. "Necessary? After my father died and everything else fell apart, it felt safer that way." Cole listened quietly. "I thought depending on people made you weak." She laughed softly. "Turns out being alone isn't strength." The fading sunlight reflected in the snow around them. "I was scared." Cole's eyes never left hers. "Of what? Losing someone again?" A long silence followed, then Cole spoke. "So was I." Just 4 words, yet they carried years of loneliness, years of grief, years of hope carefully hidden away. June felt tears sting her eyes, not from sadness, from relief. Finally, she smiled. "I'm staying." A question appeared in his expression. "The ranch?" She shook her head gently. "Not just the ranch?" Understanding slowly dawned. For a moment, neither spoke. Neither needed to. Then Cole stepped closer, close enough that the distance no longer felt impossible. Close enough that neither had to carry everything alone. "You sure?" he asked quietly. June nodded. "More sure than I've been about anything in years." The smile that appeared on his face was small, but real, and somehow worth every mile of the journey that brought them there. Months later, winter gave way to spring. Snow melted from the mountains. Wildflowers returned to the valley. The ranch thrived, so did the people who called it home. The town's opinion of Cole changed slowly but steadily, not because he demanded it, because the truth finally spoke louder than the rumors. Lucy and her grandmother visited often. Martha claimed she had known all along that things would work out. No one believed her. One warm evening, June and Cole sat beside the river as the sun settled beyond the hills. Golden light danced across the water. The valley stretched peacefully around them. No storms, no loneliness. No walls left standing between them. June rested her head against his shoulder. Cole slipped an arm around her. Neither hurried the moment. The future remained unwritten. But for the first time, that uncertainty felt beautiful instead of frightening. Together they watched the last light fade across the valley they loved. And at last, both of them understood something simple. Home was never just a place. Sometimes home was a person who stayed.